When I opened that small, crumpled piece of paper, I never imagined those 5 words scribbled by my daughter would change everything. Pretend to be sick and leave. I looked at her, confused, and she just shook her head frantically, begging me to believe her. It was only later that I found out why. But before we continue, make sure you are already subscribed to the channel and write in the comments. Where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. The morning had started like any other in our house on the outskirts of Chicago. It had been just over 2 years since I married Richard, a successful businessman I met after my divorce. Our life seemed perfect in everyone's eyes. A comfortable house, money in the bank, and my daughter Sarah finally had the stability she needed so much. Sarah was always an observant child, too quiet for her 14 years. She seemed to absorb everything around her like a sponge. At first, her relationship with Richard was difficult, as expected from any teenager dealing with a stepfather. But over time, they seemed to have found a balance. At least, that's what I thought. That Saturday morning, Richard had invited his partners for brunch at our house. It was an important event. They were going to discuss the company's expansion. And Richard was particularly anxious to impress them. I spent the whole week preparing everything, from the menu to the smallest details of the decoration. I was in the kitchen finishing the salad when Sarah appeared. Her face was pale, and there was something in her eyes I couldn't immediately identify. Tension. Fear. "Mom," she murmured, approaching like someone trying not to draw attention. "I need to show you something in my room." Richard walked into the kitchen right then, adjusting his expensive tie. He always dressed impeccably, even for casual events at home. "What are you two whispering about?" he asked, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing important," I replied automatically. "Sarah is just asking for help with some school stuff." "Well, be quick," he said, checking his watch. "The guests arrive in 30 minutes, and I need you here to welcome them with me." I nodded, following my daughter down the hall. As soon as we entered her room, she shut the door quickly, almost too abruptly. "What's wrong? Honey, you're scaring me." Sarah didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed a small piece of paper from her desk and put it in my hands, glancing nervously at the door. I unfolded the paper and read the hurried words. "Pretend to be sick and leave. Now." "Sarah, what kind of joke is this?" I asked, confused and a little annoyed. "We don't have time for games, not with guests about to arrive." "It's not a joke." Her voice was just a whisper. "Please, Mom, trust me. You need to get out of this house now. Make up anything. Say you feel sick, but leave." The desperation in her eyes paralyzed me. In all my years as a mother, I had never seen my daughter so serious, so scared. "Sarah, you're alarming me. What is going on?" She looked at the door again, as if afraid someone was listening. "I can't explain now. I promise I'll tell you everything later. But right now, you have to trust me. Please." Before I could insist, we heard footsteps in the hall. The doorknob turned and Richard appeared, his face now visibly irritated. "What's taking you two so long? The first guest just arrived." I looked at my daughter, whose eyes were silently pleading. Then, on an impulse I couldn't explain, I decided to trust her. "I'm sorry, Richard," I said, bringing my hand to my forehead. "I suddenly feel a little dizzy. I think it might be a migraine." Richard frowned. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Right now. Helen, you were perfectly fine 5 minutes ago." "I know. It just hit me suddenly," I explained, trying to sound genuinely unwell. "You guys can start without me. I'm going to take a pill and lie down for a bit." For a tense moment, I thought he was going to argue, but then the doorbell rang. and he seemed to decide that dealing with the guests was more important. "All right, but try to join us as soon as possible," he said, leaving the room. As soon as we were alone again, Sarah grabbed my hands. "You're not going to lie down. We're leaving here right now. Say you need to go to the pharmacy to buy stronger medicine. I'll go with you." "Sarah, this is absurd. I can't just abandon our guests." "Mom," her voice trembled, "I'm begging you. This isn't a game. This is about your life." There was something so raw, so genuine in her fear, that I felt a chill run down my spine. What could have scared my daughter so much? What did she know that I didn't? I quickly grabbed my purse and the car keys. We found Richard in the living room, chatting animatedly with two men in suits. "Richard, excuse me," I interrupted. "My headache is getting worse. I'm going to the pharmacy to get something stronger. Sarah is coming with me." His smile froze for an instant before he turned to the guests with an expression of resignation. "My wife isn't feeling well," he explained. "Be back soon," he added. Turning to me, his tone casual, but his eyes conveyed something I couldn't decipher. When we got in the car, Sarah was trembling. "Drive, Mom," she said, looking back at the house as if expecting something terrible to happen at any moment. "Get away from here. I'll explain everything on the way." I started the car, 1,000 questions spinning in my mind. What could be so serious that my daughter was acting like this? It was when she started talking that my entire world fell apart. "Richard is trying to kill you." "Mom," she said, the words coming out like a choked sob. "I heard him last night on the phone, talking about putting poison in your tea." I slammed on the brakes. Almost hitting the back of a truck stopped at the light. My entire body froze, and for a moment I couldn't breathe, much less speak. Sarah's words seemed absurd, like something out of a cheap thriller. "What, Sarah? That's not funny at all," I finally managed to say, my voice weaker than I would have liked. "Do you think I would joke about something like that?" Her eyes were watery, her face twisted in an expression mixing fear and anger. "I heard everything. Mom, everything." A driver behind us honked, and I realized the light had turned green. I automatically hit the gas, driving without a destination, just to get away from the house. "Tell me exactly what you heard," I asked, trying to stay calm, still feeling my heart pound against my ribs like a caged animal. Sarah took a deep breath before starting. "I went downstairs for water last night. It was late, maybe 2 in the morning. Richard's office door was slightly open and the light was on. He was on the phone, whispering." She paused, as if gathering courage. "At first I thought it was about the company, but then he said your name." My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. "He said, 'Everything is planned for tomorrow. Helen will drink her tea just like she always does during these events. No one will suspect a thing. It will look like a heart attack. You assured me.' And then he laughed. Mom, he laughed like he was talking about the weather." I felt my stomach churn. This couldn't be true. Richard, the man I shared my bed with, my life, planning to kill me. It was too absurd. "Maybe you misunderstood," I suggested, desperately searching for any alternative explanation. Maybe it was about another Helen, or maybe it was some kind of metaphor for a business deal. Sarah shook her head vehemently. "No, Mom, he was talking about you, about the brunch today. He said with you out of the way, he would have full access to the insurance money and the house." She hesitated before adding, "And he mentioned my name too. He said that afterward, he would take care of me, one way or another." A coldness shot down my spine. Richard had always been so loving, so attentive. How could I have been so wrong? How did I not notice anything? Why would he do that? I murmured, more to myself than to her. "The life insurance. Mom, the one you two took out 6 months ago. Remember, $1 million. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. The insurance. Of course. Richard had insisted so much on that policy, saying it was to protect me, to secure my future in case something happened to him. But now, in this new sinister light, I realized it had been the other way around from the start. "There's more," Sarah continued, her voice almost a whisper now. "After he hung up, he started looking through some papers. I waited for him to leave and went into the office. There were documents about his debts. Mom. Lots of debts. It looks like the company is almost bankrupt." I pulled the car over to the shoulder, unable to keep driving with my mind in such a turmoil. Richard was bankrupt. How did I not know? He always talked about how business was booming, how we were financially secure. "I also found this," Sarah said, pulling a folded paper from her pocket. "It's a statement from another bank account, in his name. He's been transferring money there for months, small amounts, so it wouldn't raise suspicion." I took the paper with trembling hands. It was true, an account I knew nothing about. Accumulating what looked like our money. My money. Actually. From the sale of the apartment I had inherited from my parents, the reality began to crystallize, cruel and undeniable. Richard wasn't just bankrupt. He had been systematically stealing from me for months, probably since the beginning of our marriage. And now, with the debts piling up and less money to divert, he had decided I was worth more dead than alive. "Oh my God," I whispered, feeling nauseous. How was I so blind? Sarah put her hand on mine, a gesture of comfort that seemed absurdly mature coming from a 14-year-old. "It's not your fault, Mom. He fooled everyone, even me, for a while." Suddenly, a terrible thought struck me. "Sarah, did you take those documents from his office? What if he notices they're missing? What if he suspects you know?" The fear returned to her eyes. "I took pictures with my phone and put everything back. I don't think he'll notice." But even as she said it, she didn't seem totally convinced, and neither was I. Richard was meticulous, observant. If anything was out of place, he would notice. "We need to call the police," I decided, grabbing my phone. "And say what?" Sarah challenged. "That he was talking about killing you on the phone, that we found documents showing he's diverting money. We have no real proof of anything." Mom. She was right. Of course. It was our word against his. A respected businessman against a hysterical ex-wife and a troubled teenager. I could already imagine how the story would be twisted. As we weighed our options, my phone vibrated. A text from Richard. "Where are you? The guests are asking for you." Another chill ran down my spine. His message seemed so normal, so mundane, as if he hadn't planned to kill me just hours ago. "What are we going to do now?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. It was a question I had no answer for. We couldn't go back home, that was clear. But we couldn't just disappear without a plan either. Richard had resources, contacts. If we fled without thinking, he would find us eventually. First, we need proof, I finally decided. Concrete proof we can't take to the police. Like what? Like the poison he planned to use today. The plan forming in my mind was risky, maybe even reckless, but as the initial terror gave way to a cold, calculating anger, I knew we had to act, and fast. "We're going back," I announced, turning the key in the ignition. "What?" Sarah's eyes widened in panic. "Mom, have you lost your mind? He's going to kill you." "Not if I get him first," I replied, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. "Think with me, Sarah. If we run now without proof, what happens? Richard will claim I had a breakdown, that I dragged you off on some irrational impulse. He'll find us eventually, and we'll be even more vulnerable." I made a sharp U-turn, heading back towards our house. "We need concrete evidence. The poison he plans to use today is our best shot. If we can find it, we'll have something tangible to show the police." Sarah stared at me, her face a mixture of fear and admiration. "But how are we going to do it without him noticing? We'll keep up the charade. I'll say I went to the pharmacy. Took a painkiller, and I'm feeling a little better. You'll go straight to your room, pretending to be unwell too. While I distract Richard and the guests, you search the office, in the places where you saw him looking recently." Sarah nodded slowly, her gaze determined despite the obvious fear. "And what if I find something? Or worse, what if he realizes what we're doing?" I swallowed hard, trying not to let my own dread show. "Send a text with the word 'now.' If I get it, I'll make an excuse and we'll leave immediately. If you find something, take pictures, but don't take anything. We can't risk him noticing something is missing." As we got closer to the house, I felt my heart pound harder and harder. I was about to walk into the lion's den, knowing now that the man I called my husband was planning to kill me. The thought was so surreal it almost felt like a nightmare, one I desperately wanted to wake up from. When I parked in the driveway, I noticed there were more cars than when we left. All the guests had arrived. "Remember the plan?" I told Sarah as we walked to the door. "Act naturally. If at any point you feel you're in danger, leave the house immediately. Go to Mrs. Gable's house next door. Got it?" My daughter nodded, squeezing my hand briefly before we went inside. The murmur of conversations and laughter greeted us as soon as we opened the door. In the living room, about 10 people were chatting animatedly, champagne glasses in hand. Richard was in the center, telling some story that was making everyone laugh. When he saw us, his smile faltered for just an instant before composing itself. "Ah, you're back," he exclaimed, walking over and putting an arm around my waist. His touch, once comforting, now repulsed me. "Are you feeling better, dear?" "A little," I replied, forcing a smile. "The medicine is starting to kick in." "Good to hear," he turned to Sarah. "And you, kiddo, you look a little pale." "I have a headache too," Sarah mumbled, playing her part perfectly. "I think I'm going to lie down for a bit." Of course, Richard said, his concern so convincing that, if I didn't know the truth, I would have completely believed it. "Rest up. If you need anything, we're downstairs." Sarah went upstairs, and I joined the guests, accepting a glass of water Richard offered me. I refused the champagne, claiming it wouldn't mix with the medicine. "No tea today?" he asked casually, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "I think not," I replied, keeping my tone light. "I'm trying to avoid caffeine when I have a migraine." Something darkened in his eyes for a brief moment, but it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by his usual charm. "Smart of you. Come, I want to introduce you to someone." As Richard guided me through the guests, I kept a fixed smile on my face, though inside I was on high alert. Every time he touched my arm or my back, I had to fight the urge to pull away. Every smile he gave me now seemed loaded with sinister double meanings. "Helen is a university professor," he told one of his partners, his pride seemingly genuine. "Mexican literature, a brilliant mind." It was surreal to hear those compliments, knowing that, behind the scenes, he was planning my end. How many times had he praised me like that, while secretly plotting against me? How many times had his "I love you" been a mask for "I want your money"? Discreetly, I checked my phone. No message from Sarah yet. That meant she was still searching, or hadn't found anything suspicious. About 20 minutes later, as Richard and I were talking with a couple about the country's economic situation, my phone vibrated, a single word on the screen. "Now." My blood ran cold. We needed to leave immediately. "Excuse me," I said to the group, forcing a smile. "I need to check on how Sarah is feeling." Before Richard could protest, I walked away quickly, almost running up the stairs. I found Sarah in her room, her face pale as paper. "He's coming," she whispered, grabbing my arm. "I realized he was coming upstairs and ran in here." "Did you find anything?" I asked quickly, already pulling her towards the door. "Yes, in the office. A small, unlabeled bottle, hidden in his desk drawer. I took pictures." We had no more time. We heard footsteps in the hall, and then Richard's voice. "Helen, Sarah, are you in there?" I exchanged a quick glance with my daughter. We couldn't go out through the hall now. He would see us. The bedroom window overlooked the backyard. But we were on the second floor. A dangerous fall. "Stay where you are," I whispered. "We'll pretend we were just talking." The door opened, and Richard walked in, his gaze immediately fixing on Sarah's scared face. "Everything all right in here?" he asked, his tone casual, but his eyes alert, suspicious. "Yes," I replied, trying to sound normal. "Sarah still has a headache. I came to see if she needed anything." Richard studied us for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I see. And you?" "Dear, is the headache better?" "A little." I lied. "I think I can go back to the party now." He smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Excellent. By the way, I made that special tea you like. It's waiting for you in the kitchen." My stomach twisted. The tea, the trap he had mentioned on the phone. "Thank you, but I think I'll pass today. The medicine—" "I insist," he interrupted, his tone still friendly, but with a new firmness. "It's a new blend I ordered especially for you. It helps with headaches, too." I realized then how dangerous our situation was. If I refused too vehemently, I would arouse suspicion. If I drank the tea, I would die. "Okay," I finally agreed, trying to buy time. "I'll just stay a few more minutes with Sarah." Richard hesitated for a moment, as if debating internally, before nodding. "Don't take too long. The guests are asking for you." As soon as he left, closing the door behind him, Sarah and I exchanged alarmed glances. "The tea," she whispered. "He's going to insist you drink it." "I know," I replied, feeling the panic rise. "We need to get out of here now, through the window, if necessary." But as we contemplated our escape, I heard something that made me freeze, the sound of a key turning in the lock, locking us in from the outside. Richard wasn't just watching us, he had trapped us. "He locked us in," Sarah exclaimed, running to the door and trying to open it uselessly. Panic threatened to paralyze me, but I forced myself to think rationally. If Richard had locked us in, it meant he suspected something. Maybe he had realized his office had been searched, or maybe the fear in our eyes had betrayed us. "The window," I decided, moving quickly towards it. "It's our only way out now." I opened the curtain and looked down. It was a fall of about 15 feet to the grass below. Not fatal, certainly, but dangerous enough to cause serious injury if we weren't careful. "It's too high. Mom," Sarah said, her face twisted in fear. "I know, honey, but we have no choice." I looked around the room, searching for anything that could help us. My eyes landed on the comforter on the bed. "We can use this as a makeshift rope." I quickly tore the comforter off and began tying it to the heavy base of the desk. It wouldn't be long enough to get us to the ground, but it would significantly reduce the height of the fall. "Mom," Sarah called out softly, pointing towards the door. "He's coming back." Straining my ears, I realized she was right. Footsteps were approaching in the hallway. Richard was returning, and something told me it wasn't to check on our well-being. "Quick," I whispered, finishing the knot on the desk and throwing the comforter out the window. "You go first. Climb down as far as you can on the comforter and then let go. Try to land on your knees and roll to distribute the impact." Sarah hesitated for only a second before positioning herself at the window. Legs out. The footsteps were closer now. We heard the key being inserted into the lock. "Go," I ordered, helping her hold the comforter firmly. With surprising agility, Sarah began to descend, using the comforter as a makeshift rope. I watched anxiously as she reached the end of the fabric, still about 6 feet from the ground. "Let go now," I instructed, seeing the door begin to open. Sarah let go of the comforter and fell onto the grass, rolling as I had instructed. For a terrible moment, I thought she had hurt herself, but I soon saw her get up, giving a thumbs up to show she was okay. There was no more time. Richard was entering the room. Without a second thought, I grabbed the comforter and launched myself out the window, sliding down the fabric so quickly it burned my hands. When I reached the end, I heard a furious scream coming from the room. "Helen!" Richard's voice, unrecognizable with rage, made me let go of the comforter without hesitation. I landed awkwardly on the grass, feeling a sharp pain in my left ankle, but the adrenaline was so high that I barely registered the pain, getting up immediately. "Run!" I shouted to Sarah, who was standing a few feet away, looking up in horror. Following my gaze, I saw Richard leaning out the window. His face contorted into a mask of fury. For a terrifying moment, I thought he was going to jump after us, but instead, he disappeared from view. "He's going down the stairs," I warned, grabbing Sarah's hand. "We need to be fast." We ran through the backyard, limping slightly due to the pain in my ankle, towards the low wall that separated our property from the side street. Sarah jumped over first, and I followed with difficulty, feeling a jolt of pain as I landed on the other side. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked, panting. I quickly looked around, assessing our options. Our house was in a gated community, but with little security. The main guardhouse was about 500 yards away, but by now Richard would have alerted the guards, probably making up some story about his mentally unstable wife running off with the teenage daughter. "This way," I decided, pointing towards a cluster of trees that led to a more wooded area of the community. "We can cut through the woods and get out through the service entrance." As we ran, I heard the sound of slamming doors and loud voices. Richard had alerted the guests, turning our escape into a public spectacle. I imagined him, feigning concern, saying something like, "My wife isn't well. She has episodes like this sometimes. Please, help me find her." The thought spurred me to ignore the pain and run faster. I would not let him turn me into the villain of this story. We reached the woods, a small nature preserve that residents used for hiking. At this time of day, it was deserted, which was a blessing. We followed a narrow path, trying to stay quiet as we moved. "The photos," I remembered, looking at Sarah. "Do you still have the photos of the bottle?" She nodded, pulling her phone from her pocket to show me. Sarah's phone showed images of a small amber bottle, unlabeled, hidden among documents in Richard's desk drawer. It was so common, so anonymous, that it would go unnoticed by anyone. But I knew that inside was the weapon my husband planned to use against me. "There's more," Sarah said, swiping her finger across the screen to show other photos. "I found this too." The next image showed a sheet with Richard's unmistakable handwriting, a list with times and notes. 10:30, guests arrive. 11:45, serve tea to H. Effects in 15 to 20 minutes. Look concerned. Call ambulance at 12:10. Too late. My stomach churned. It was a detailed timeline of my death, planned out like someone organizing a business meeting. Cold, methodical, inhuman. "Oh my God," I whispered. "He was really going to kill me today." We heard distant voices, approaching through the woods. The search party had reached this far. "Come on," I urged, pulling Sarah's hand. "The service gate must be close." We kept running, now off the path, through trees and bushes, trying to stay away from the voices. My ankle throbbed with every step. But fear was a powerful anesthetic. Finally, we spotted the small metal gate that employees use to enter and exit the community. "It's locked," I stated, trying to push it open without success. Sarah looked around, desperate, until her eyes lit up with an idea. "Mom, your community key card. You can swipe it on the reader." I quickly grabbed my purse and took out the card we used to get in and out of the community. I swiped it through the reader, praying it would work. The green light lit up and the gate unlocked with a click. We came out onto a narrow, quiet street at the back of the community, far from the main entrance. It was a normal residential area, with simple houses and a few shops. No one on the streets at this time on a Saturday. "Where do we go now?" Sarah asked, still holding my hand tightly. I thought quickly. We couldn't go to friends' or family's houses. They would be the first places Richard would look for us. We needed somewhere anonymous. Temporary. "We're going to take a taxi to the Crestview Mall," I decided. "From there we can think better and go to the precinct." We walked hurriedly to a larger avenue where we managed to hail a taxi. The driver looked at us curiously. Two panting women, with wrinkled clothes and scared expressions. But he didn't ask questions when I asked him to take us to the nearest mall. During the ride, Sarah rested her head on my shoulder, trembling slightly. "Are you okay, honey?" I asked softly, stroking her hair. "I'm scared," she confessed. "What if he finds us?" "He won't find us," I assured her, with more confidence than I actually felt. "We'll go to the police. With the proof you got, they'll protect us." At the mall, I looked for a discreet place where we could sit. A coffee shop on the second floor seemed ideal, busy enough not to draw attention, but not too crowded. We ordered 2 hot chocolates and sat in a secluded corner. "We need to call the police now," I said, picking up my phone. That's when I noticed the dozens of missed calls and messages from Richard. With trembling hands, I opened the last message. "Helen, please, come home. I'm so worried about you and Sarah. If this is about our argument yesterday, we can talk. Don't do anything impulsive. I love you." The falseness of those words brought on a new wave of nausea. He was building his narrative, creating evidence that I was unstable, maybe even inventing an argument that never happened. "What is he doing?" Sarah asked, watching my expression. "Creating an alibi," I replied, showing her the message. "He's going to claim I had some kind of breakdown, that I imagined everything." Another message arrived. "I called the police. They are looking for you. They are worried about you too. Please, Helen, think of Sarah." My blood ran cold. He had involved the police, but not as a victim. As the concerned husband of an emotionally unstable woman. "This complicates everything," I murmured. "If the police are looking for us, based on his story." Sarah looked at me with frightened eyes. "What are we going to do?" I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. We needed help, someone who would believe us and could give us support against Richard's accusations. "I'm going to call Francesca Navarro," I finally decided. Francesca Navarro was my friend from college and now a criminal lawyer. We didn't talk often, but we kept in touch. If there was anyone who could guide us right now, it was her. I dialed her number, praying she would answer on a Saturday. "Francesca." "It's Helen," I said as soon as she answered. "I have a serious problem. I need your help." Over the next 20 minutes, I explained everything. Sarah's note, the conversation my daughter overheard, the photos of the bottle and the timeline. Our desperate escape. Francesca listened without interrupting, asking only pointed questions to clarify details. "Where are you now?" she finally asked. "At the Crestview Mall," I replied, "in the coffee shop on the second floor." "Stay there," she ordered. "I'm coming to get you. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Don't talk to anyone, especially not the police, until I get there." "Understood." "Yes," I agreed, feeling a momentary relief. "Thank you, Francesca." While we waited, Sarah and I sat in silence, nervously watching the people around us. Every man who entered the coffee shop made me flinch, fearing I would see Richard's face. "How did you know?" I finally asked Sarah, holding her hands across the table. "How did you realize something was wrong, even before you heard that conversation?" Sarah looked down, hesitant. "I already distrusted him for a while, Mom," she confessed. "Small things, the way he looked at you when he thought no one was watching. Cold. Calculating, and how he got nervous when you mentioned the money from the apartment sale." I swallowed hard, realizing how many signs I had ignored because I was so invested, so blindly in love. "One time," Sarah continued, I heard him talking on the phone about how the plan was taking longer than expected. At the time, I thought it was about work. But after I heard the conversation last night, it all started to make sense. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Honey, because I wasn't sure. And she hesitated. You seemed happy with him, Mom. After everything we went through with Dad. I didn't want to ruin your happiness over suspicions that might just be in my head, until last night, when I was sure. Tears streamed down my face as the truth hit me with full force. My teenage daughter had realized the danger long before I did. She had protected me when I should have been protecting her. I'm sorry, I whispered, squeezing her hands. I'm sorry I didn't see it. It's not your fault, Sarah said, with a maturity that surprised me. He fooled everyone. He was very good at it. Just then, my phone vibrated with a new message. It was Richard again. The police found blood in Sarah's room. Helen, what did you do? Please, tell me you two are okay. I showed the message to Sarah, who turned pale. Blood? There was no blood in my room. He's planting evidence, I concluded, feeling a new dread, trying to make it look like I hurt you, or worse. This took everything to a new level of danger. Richard wasn't just trying to make me look unstable. He was framing me for a crime I didn't commit. Let's get out of here, Sarah said, starting to get up. What if the police come looking for us here? No, I replied firmly. Francesca said to wait. If we leave now, it will just look like we're fleeing, which would give more credibility to Richard's lies. That's when I saw, on the other side of the coffee shop, 2 uniformed police officers walking in and looking around, as if searching for someone. Mom, Sarah whispered, also noticing the police. Calm down, I instructed, although my own heart was racing. We didn't do anything wrong. We have proof. We'll talk to them, but very carefully. The officers spotted us and began to approach our table. I saw the recognition in their eyes. They probably had a description of us, maybe even photos. Mrs. Helen Mendoza, one of them asked, stopping at our table. Yes, that's me, I replied, keeping my voice as calm as possible. Your husband is very worried about you and your daughter, he said, his tone professional but cautious. He reported that you left the house in an altered state, possibly putting the minor at risk. Before I could answer, Sarah intervened. That's a lie. My stepfather is trying to kill us. I have proof. The officers exchanged skeptical glances after Sarah's emphatic statement. The older one, a man about 50 with graying temples, frowned. That's a very serious accusation, young lady, he said, his tone now more grave. We have proof, I insisted, keeping my voice low but firm. My daughter found a bottle of poison in my husband's office, along with a timeline detailing how and when he planned to kill me today. The younger officer, who had been silent until then, stepped forward. Ma'am, your husband informed us that you might be going through psychological problems, he said, choosing his words carefully. He said you've had similar episodes before. Rage bubbled up inside me. Richard had set the stage perfectly. That's absurd. I've never had any episodes, I replied, fighting to keep my composure. My husband is lying to you because we uncovered his plans. Sarah grabbed her phone. Look, she said, showing the photos she had taken. This is the bottle I found hidden in his office. And this paper has the timeline with the schedules of when he was going to poison me. The officers examined the photos, their expressions hard to read. This looks like a common bottle, the older one observed. As for the paper, it could be any note. I don't see anything that explicitly indicates a murder plot. I felt desperation growing. They weren't taking us seriously. You don't understand, I insisted. He has kept us isolated for months. He controls our finances, our movements. We recently discovered he's bankrupt and diverting my money to secret accounts. Mom, Sarah interrupted, pointing towards the entrance of the coffee shop. It's Ms. Francesca. I looked in the direction she pointed and saw my friend walking quickly towards us. Even after so many years, I would recognize her anywhere. Tall, with a confident posture, dressed impeccably in a navy blazer despite it being a Saturday. Her determined gaze brought me immense relief. "Helen," she said, stopping beside us and immediately assessing the situation. "I see the police have already arrived." "Who are you, ma'am?" the older officer asked. "Francesca Navarro," she replied, handing him a business card. "Criminal lawyer. I am representing Mrs. Helen Mendoza and her daughter Sarah." The officers seemed to recalibrate their approach immediately. "Counselor, we received a report from Mr. Richard Mendoza, alleging that his wife is mentally unstable and may pose a danger to the minor," the officer explained. "I understand," Francesca said with a slight smile. "And you considered, of course, that Mr. Mendoza might be making false accusations to cover up his own crimes, correct?" The officer's silence was telling. "Let's clarify a few points," Francesca continued, sitting down next to me. "My clients have photographic evidence of potentially lethal substances and written documentation suggesting a plan to poison Mrs. Mendoza. Furthermore, Miss Sarah overheard a phone conversation in which Mr. Mendoza explicitly discussed his plans. The officers seemed to consider this new information, but were still hesitant. "Do you have a warrant to take my clients into custody?" Francesca asked directly. "No, Counselor," the older officer admitted. "We are just investigating a potential missing person report based on Mr. Mendoza's account." "Well, as you can see, no one is missing," Francesca replied curtly. "My clients are safe and sound, away from a credible threat to their lives." "Mr. Mendoza mentioned blood found in the minor's room," the younger officer commented, looking at Sarah. "He said he was worried the mother might have done something." Sarah let out a nervous laugh. "That's ridiculous! There was no blood in my room. He's planting evidence." "I'd like to verify that the minor is okay," the officer insisted. "She is clearly fine," Francesca replied, "and she is under my legal protection at this time. I suggest you return to the precinct and file a countercomplaint, which I am making right now. Attempted murder, evidence tampering, and filing a false police report against Mr. Richard Mendoza." The officers looked uncomfortable, but didn't press further. "We will need you to come to the precinct to give a statement," the older officer finally said. "Of course," Francesca agreed. "We will be there in an hour. Now, if you'll excuse us, we need to speak privately." Reluctantly, the officers walked away, but not before casting worried glances in our direction. As soon as we were alone, Francesca held my hands across the table. "Helen, the situation is worse than I imagined," she said in a low voice. "Richard acted quickly. He's building a case against you, trying to paint you as an unstable woman who could harm her own daughter." "What are we going to do?" I asked, feeling the fear return. "First, we need more concrete proof," Francesca replied. "The photos are a start, but we need the actual bottle and an analysis to prove it contains poison. And we need to find more evidence of Richard's financial maneuvers." "But how?" Sarah questioned. "We can't go back to the house." "You don't need to," Francesca assured her. "I'm going to request a search warrant immediately. I have contacts who can expedite this, especially considering there's a minor potentially in danger." She paused, looking at me seriously. "Helen, you have to be strong now. Richard is going to play dirty. He's going to bring up anything he can to discredit you. Small arguments, moments of stress, anything that can be twisted to make you look unstable." I swallowed hard, realizing the gravity of the situation. "How did he fool me so completely?" I murmured, more to myself than to Francesca. "People like Richard are masters of manipulation," she replied. "Functional sociopaths who can maintain a perfect facade for years. Don't blame yourself for not noticing." Just then, my phone vibrated again, another message from Richard. "Helen, did the police find you? I'm coming to the mall now. I just want to help. Please, don't do anything impulsive before I get there." I showed the message to Francesca, who immediately became alert. "He's coming here," she said, standing up. "We need to leave now." "Where to?" I asked, helping Sarah gather her things. "To the precinct," Francesca replied. "It's the safest place right now. Richard won't try anything there, and we can formally file our report before he arrives." We quickly left the coffee shop, taking the long way to the parking lot to avoid the main entrance. Francesca led us to her car, a discreet black sedan, and soon we were on our way to the precinct. During the drive, Sarah held my hand tightly, her face pale but determined. I remembered how she had saved my life today, with that simple note. How many other wives hadn't been so lucky? How many didn't realize the danger until it was too late? The precinct was relatively quiet for a Saturday. Francesca led us directly to the commander's office, with whom she apparently had a good professional relationship. "Commander Rios," she greeted the middle-aged man sitting behind the desk. "We have a serious situation here." The commander looked at us curiously, inviting us to sit. "My clients are being threatened by Mrs. Mendoza's husband," Francesca explained succinctly. "We have evidence that he planned to poison her today, during an event at their home." The commander raised his eyebrows, surprised by the seriousness of the accusation. "That's a serious claim, Counselor Navarro." "And we have serious evidence," she retorted, motioning for Sarah to show the photos. The commander examined the images with more attention than the officers at the mall had. As he analyzed, Francesca continued, "We also believe Mr. Mendoza is diverting the money from Mrs. Helen and may be involved in financial fraud. He has tried to discredit my client, alleging mental instability that was never diagnosed or treated." "I understand," the commander replied, handing the phone back to Sarah. "We need more than photos, Counselor. We need the bottle, toxicology reports, concrete evidence." "That's exactly why I'm requesting a search warrant for the residence," Francesca said. Handing over some documents she had prepared on the way, "There is a minor at risk, and we have reason to believe Mr. Mendoza is planting false evidence as we speak." The commander began to read the documents when a murmur started at the precinct entrance. Through the glass of the office, I saw Richard entering, accompanied by the same officers who had approached us at the mall. His face was the perfect mask of concern and relief upon seeing us. "Helen Sarah," he exclaimed, trying to enter the office, but being blocked by an officer at the door. "Thank God you're safe." The commander looked from Richard to us, clearly trying to assess the situation. "Is this the man in question?" he asked. "Yes," I confirmed, feeling my body tense instinctively. "This is Richard Mendoza, my husband." The commander gestured for them to let Richard in. He approached, trying to hug Sarah, who visibly recoiled. "What is going on?" he asked, his expression of confusion so convincing that, if I didn't know the truth, I would have doubted myself. "Helen, why did you run off like that? The guests were so worried. I was desperate." "Mr. Mendoza," the commander interjected, "Mrs. Helen and her lawyer are filing a report against you for attempted murder." Richard looked genuinely shocked, looking from me to the commander and back to me. "This is absurd," he exclaimed. "Helen, what are you doing? Is this about that medicine I already told you it was just to help with your anxiety attacks?" "What medicine?" the commander asked, now more interested. "Helen has been having problems," Richard explained, his voice softening as if he were reluctant to share something painful. "Anxiety, paranoia sometimes. The doctor prescribed a mild tranquilizer. She thinks I'm trying to drug her, but it's just the medication Dr. Santos prescribed." I felt a chill down my back. His narrative was so plausible, so carefully constructed. "That's a lie," I replied, my voice trembling with rage. "I've never had anxiety problems. I've never visited this Dr. Santos. He's making all of this up." Richard sighed heavily, as if dealing with a difficult child. "You see," he said to the commander, "she has been denying her condition for months. She even refuses to take the medication regularly, which only makes the episodes worse. Mr. Mendoza," Francesca interrupted, her voice cutting like a razor. My client has never been diagnosed with any psychological disorder. Can you produce the medical records to prove your allegations? Richard hesitated for a moment, almost imperceptible, but it was there. I can request them from Dr. Santos on Monday, he replied. But that's not the most important thing right now. I'm worried about Helen and Sarah. I just want to take them home safely. That won't be possible at the moment, the commander declared, much to my relief. We have serious accusations from both sides that need to be investigated. It was then that Sarah, who had remained silent until now, stood up abruptly. I heard everything, she said, looking Richard straight in the eye. I heard you on the phone last night, planning to poison my mom. You said it would look like a heart attack. You said you would take care of me afterward. You are a liar. Richard's expression changed for an instant, a flash of fury, quickly masked by concern. Sarah, honey, he said softly. You must have misunderstood. I was talking about business on the phone. You probably heard part of the conversation and got confused. I wasn't confused at all, Sarah retorted, her voice firm despite the tears starting to form. You wanted to kill my mom for the insurance money. You're bankrupt. I saw the documents. Richard's face hardened slightly. Helen, he said, turning to me, do you see what you're doing? You're planting ideas in Sarah's head, making her believe these crazy things. This is psychological abuse. Before I could respond, the office door opened again. A police officer entered, holding an envelope. Commander, he said, we just received the preliminary forensics results from the Mendoza residence. You'll want to see this. The commander opened the envelope and examined its contents with a grave expression. The tension in the room was palpable. Richard stood motionless as a statue, Sarah gripping my hand tightly, Francesca watching every reaction intently. Interesting, the commander finally muttered, looking directly at Richard. Mr. Mendoza, you mentioned blood in the miner's room, correct? Richard nodded, his expression of concern perfectly composed. Yes. When I entered the room after Helen and Sarah fled, I noticed stains on the carpet. I was frantic, imagining the worst. Curious, the commander continued, placing the papers on the desk. Because according to this preliminary analysis, the blood found in the room is less than 2 hours old, and the blood type analysis does not match either Mrs. Helen or the miner. I saw Richard's mask falter for an instant. I don't understand, he stammered. How is that possible? The blood, the commander explained slowly. It matches your blood type, Mr. Mendoza, which strongly suggests that it was you who placed it there. A heavy silence fell over the room. Richard seemed to be quickly calculating his next move. That's impossible, he finally said. There must be some mistake in the tests. I didn't even cut myself today. In fact, the commander continued, forensics found a small vial of blood hidden in the back of your sock drawer. It seems you had collected your own blood previously. Richard's face turned visibly pale. Furthermore, the commander went on, we found this. He pulled a photo from the envelope, the amber bottle Sarah had photographed, now in an evidence bag. The contents are being analyzed, but preliminary tests indicate the presence of a substance similar to arsenic, not exactly something you'd expect to find in an anxiety medication. Is it, Mr. Mendoza? Richard stood up abruptly, his face contorted in a mixture of rage and panic. This is absurd. A setup. Helen must have planted this. When exactly would she have done that? Francesca asked calmly, considering she and Sarah have been here for over 2 hours. And according to your own words, they fled the house this morning. Richard looked around like a cornered animal. Don't you understand? He said, his voice now trembling. Helen is not who you think she is. She is manipulative. She has been stealing from me for months. Funny you should mention stealing, the commander interrupted, because we also found some rather interesting bank documents in your office, regular transfers from the joint account to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. It was like watching a house of cards crumble. Each new revelation shattered the facade Richard had so carefully built. His face, once the picture of loving concern, now revealed what had always been hidden beneath the surface: cold rage, calculation, contempt. "This all has an explanation," he insisted. But his voice no longer carried the same conviction. "I'm sure it does," the commander replied, standing up, "and you will have ample opportunity to explain all of this formally. Richard Mendoza, you are being detained for investigation of attempted murder, evidence tampering, filing a false report, and financial fraud." The commander signaled to the officers waiting at the door. It was as if a switch had been flipped inside Richard. In an instant, the entire facade of the concerned man disappeared completely. His face twisted into an expression I had never seen before: pure malice, raw hatred, directed at me. "You stupid bitch!" he screamed, lunging in my direction. "You ruined everything!" The officers grabbed him before he could reach me, but not before I finally saw the real Richard, the monster who had hidden behind smiles and false affection for 2 years. "Did you really think I loved you?" he snarled, fighting against the officers holding him. "A mediocre professor with a troubled teenager. You were worthless, except for your money and the life insurance." Sarah shrank against me, trembling at the violence of his outburst. I held her protectively, watching in shock as the officers handcuffed Richard, who continued to shout obscenities. "Get him out of here," the commander ordered. And the officers dragged Richard out of the room, his screams echoing down the hall. When the door closed, a heavy silence filled the room. The commander turned to us with an expression mixing regret and relief. "Mrs. Mendoza, I believe you and your daughter will need to give formal statements. But first, I'd like to apologize personally for what just happened." I nodded mechanically, still processing the transformation I had witnessed. That man screaming insults was not the Richard I knew, or thought I knew. It was as if I had been living with a stranger for 2 years, sleeping next to a predator every night. "Helen," Francesca said softly, taking my hand, "are you okay?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I think it will take time to understand all of this." The commander offered us water and suggested we rest a bit before making our formal statements. I accepted, hugging Sarah, who seemed to be in shock. "You saved my life today," I whispered to her. "I will never forget it." She just nodded, silent tears streaming down her face. The following hours passed in a blur of statements, forms, and bureaucratic procedures. I told everything in detail: how I met Richard after my divorce, how he won me over with his apparent kindness and security, how he gradually began to control our finances and isolate us from friends and family. Sarah described what she had heard that fateful night, how she had found the documents and the bottle, and how she had made the brave decision to pass me that note. Pretend to be sick and leave. 5 simple words that had changed everything. That had saved me from a terrible fate. Forensics continued to work at our house throughout the night, uncovering more evidence of Richard's extensive financial fraud. He had systematically transferred almost all the money I owned to secret accounts. He had forged my signature on documents. He had even taken out the $1 million life insurance policy without my real knowledge. I had signed, thinking it was a homeowner's policy. The test on the bottle confirmed what we already knew. It contained a mixture of arsenic and other substances that, if ingested, would cause symptoms similar to a heart attack, an apparently natural death that wouldn't raise suspicions. When we finally finished at the precinct, it was already past midnight. Richard had been formally arrested and was awaiting a custody hearing. Francesca took us to her house, insisting we couldn't go back to ours, not only because it was still a crime scene, but because the memories would be too painful. "You can stay with me as long as you need," she said, showing us the guest room. "Tomorrow, we'll think about what to do next." That night, lying next to Sarah in Francesca's bed, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Richard's face transforming. I saw the hatred in his eyes when his charade finally fell apart. How had I been so blind? How did I not notice the clues that were right in front of me? "Mom," Sarah whispered in the dark, her voice small and vulnerable, "do you think he really never loved us? Not even a little bit?" The question broke my heart. Despite everything, Sarah was still a teenager who had lost a father figure, first her own father in the divorce, and now Richard in this horrible way. "I don't know, honey," I answered honestly. "But what I know is that the problem wasn't with us. It was with him. Some people are like that, incapable of truly loving, seeing others only as tools for their own ends." She was silent for a long moment. "How are we going to move on, Mom?" she finally asked. It was the million-dollar question. How do you rebuild your life after such a profound betrayal? How do you trust anyone again? "One day at a time," I replied, holding her close. "Together, always together." In the weeks that followed, we discovered the full extent of Richard's web of lies. He wasn't the successful businessman he claimed to be. His company had been bankrupt for years. He had married me specifically, targeting my inheritance. The apartment I sold for a considerable amount after my parents' death. Every romantic gesture, every declaration of love, every moment I thought was special. It had all been calculated, part of a cold, methodical plan. The investigation also revealed that I was not his first victim. There was another woman before me, a widow who died naturally 6 months after marrying him, at the time. No one suspected anything. She had previous heart problems, so a heart attack didn't raise red flags. Richard inherited everything, spent it quickly, and then found his next prey: me. The trial was a media spectacle. The story of a husband planning to poison his wife for money, stopped only by the quick thinking of a brave teenager, captured the public's attention. Sarah and I had to relive that terrible day many times, in statements, in interviews with prosecutors, in the courtroom itself. But unlike what I feared, the process, though painful, was also a form of catharsis. Each revelation, each piece of evidence presented, helped me understand that I was not guilty, that I wasn't stupid for not noticing. Richard was a skilled sociopath, a predator who had perfected his craft over years. The sentence, when it finally came, was heavy. 30 years for attempted first-degree murder, plus 15 years for financial fraud, with strong indications of involvement in the death of his ex-wife, which was still under investigation. 6 months after that fateful Saturday, Sarah and I moved into a new apartment in another neighborhood. It was smaller than the house we shared with Richard, but it was ours, a space free of toxic memories, a new beginning. That morning, as I was unpacking some books, I found a small, folded piece of paper between the pages of a novel. I immediately recognized Sarah's handwriting, and the words transported me back to that crucial moment: pretend to be sick and leave. I kept the note carefully in a small wooden box I kept on my nightstand, a permanent reminder not only of the danger we faced, but also of the strength we found in ourselves to overcome it. A year passed since the day of the note. Life went on, as it always does, even after the most traumatic events. Sarah and I found a new normal, though we carried the invisible scars of that terrible experience. On one particularly sunny Saturday afternoon, we were in our apartment kitchen preparing lunch together, something that had become a weekly ritual for us. I watched Sarah dicing tomatoes with precision, her face concentrated on the task. She had grown so much this year, not just physically, but in maturity and inner strength. "A penny for your thoughts," she said, noticing my gaze. "I was just thinking about how lucky we are," I replied, surprising both of us with the sincerity of those words. Sarah raised an eyebrow, incredulous. "Lucky after everything we went through with that monster." I nodded, putting the wooden spoon on the counter and turning fully towards her. "Yes, lucky. Not for finding Richard, obviously, but for surviving, for having each other, for you being brave enough to save me that day." A blush crept up Sarah's neck. Even after a year. She still felt uncomfortable when I mentioned her bravery. Anyone would have done the same, she muttered. No, they wouldn't, I insisted. Many people would have been paralyzed by fear, would have doubted what they heard, would have waited for more proof. You acted decisively, and you saved my life, Sarah smiled shyly, returning her attention to the tomatoes. You know what Dr. Berta said in therapy this week? She asked, changing the subject slightly. She said that trauma survivors often develop a sixth sense for detecting danger, that maybe that's why I always felt something weird about Richard, even when you didn't see anything. Dr. Berta was our therapist. Yes, we decided to go to therapy together after the trauma, one of the best decisions we ever made. She's right, I agreed. You were always sensitive to the people around you, even when you were little, and after the difficult divorce with your father. I let the sentence hang in the air, not wanting to bring up more painful memories. My first husband's divorce had been turbulent, with him completely abandoning his parental responsibilities. Sarah was only 9 at the time, and the rejection had left its mark. Yeah, I think I learned to recognize men who aren't trustworthy, she said, with a wisdom beyond her years. We continued preparing lunch in comfortable silence, each lost in our own thoughts. The apartment was filled with natural light. The aroma of fresh spices filled the air, and there was a sense of peace that, for a long time, I thought I would never feel again. The doorbell rang, interrupting our moment. That must be Francesca, I commented, checking the clock. She's always early. Francesca had become more than our lawyer. She was a close friend, a constant presence in our recovery journey. We had dinner together at least once a month, a tradition that started as a way to discuss the ongoing legal aspects of the case, but evolved into a genuine friendship. I opened the door and there she was, holding a bottle of wine and an animated expression. I have news, she announced, walking in and hugging me before doing the same to Sarah. Good news, for a change. We sat in the living room, curious about what had made Francesca so excited. The police finally got the missing evidence regarding the death of Luciana, Richard's first wife. She explained, referring to the widow who had died mysteriously. They exhumed the body and found traces of arsenic preserved in her hair and nails. I felt a chill run down my spine. The confirmation that Richard had, in fact, murdered a woman before trying to do the same to me was disturbing, but it also brought a strange sense of validation. Does that mean, I began, barely able to form the question. It means he will be tried for first-degree murder, Francesca confirmed, which, considering his current conviction and the new evidence, it will likely result in life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sarah let out an audible sigh. So he'll never get out of prison. Never, Francesca assured her firmly. He will never be able to hurt anyone again. The news should have brought me only relief, but I found my feelings were more complex. There was sadness, too, not for Richard, but for the lives he had destroyed, including Luciana's, who wasn't lucky enough to have a Sarah to save her. There's one more thing, Francesca continued, her tone shifting to something lighter. The sale of Richard's assets finally went through. As part of the restitution agreement, the full amount will be transferred to you. It's not everything he stole, but it's a start. I looked at Sarah, who seemed equally surprised. How much? I asked. Approximately $500,000, Francesca replied. Enough to ensure Sarah can go to any university she wants and to give you both the financial security you lost. It was a considerable sum, especially after a year of living extremely frugally, using only what was left of my savings and my university salary. I don't know what to say, I murmured. Say we're going to celebrate with this wine, Francesca suggested, lifting the bottle she had brought, and that we can finally turn this page and look to the future. While Francesca opened the wine and Sarah finished preparing lunch, I went to my room and opened the small wooden box where I kept the note that had saved my life. I looked at those 5 words for a long moment, reflecting on how something so small and simple had completely changed the course of our lives. Pretend to be sick and leave. If Sarah hadn't been observant enough to notice the signs, if she hadn't been brave enough to act. I shuddered to think of the alternative. I went back to the living room where Francesca and Sarah were chatting animatedly about university plans that now seemed much more viable. Looking at them, my smart and brave daughter, my loyal and fierce friend, I felt a wave of gratitude so intense it almost took my breath away. "A toast," I said, raising my glass after Francesca poured the wine. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," they repeated in unison. As we savored our lunch, talking about the future instead of the past, I realized that although the scars remained, they had become marks of survival, not just trauma. Richard had tried to destroy us, but in the end, his betrayal strengthened us in ways he could never imagine. I had learned to trust my instincts again, to recognize red flags in relationships, and most importantly, to value the strength that was inside me, a strength that was always there, but that I only discovered when I needed it most. Sarah had grown from an insecure teenager to a confident young woman who knew her own worth. Therapy helped her process not only the trauma with Richard, but also the abandonment by her biological father. She now talked about studying psychology, inspired by the way therapy had helped us heal. "Mom," Sarah said as we washed the dishes together after lunch, Francesca helping to put the clean plates away. "Remember that conversation we had in the hospital right after everything happened?" I nodded, remembering the hazy days after Richard's arrest, when we both underwent complete medical exams to ensure he hadn't started slowly poisoning us even before that fateful day. "You asked me how we were going to move on," Sarah continued. "And you said one day at a time, together." "I remember," I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. "I think we're doing it, aren't we?" She smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her eyes. "Moving on, yes," I agreed. Hugging her with hands still wet with soap. "We definitely are." That night, after Francesca left and Sarah fell asleep, I sat on our apartment balcony, looking at the city lights. I thought about all the other women who might be out there right at this moment, living with their own Richards, unaware of the danger under their own roofs. I decided then that our story needed to be told, not just as a warning, but as a message of hope, to show that it's possible to survive the worst of betrayals and rebuild, that appearances are deceiving, and that sometimes our salvation comes from where we least expect it, like a simple note scribbled in a hurry by a teenager. The next day, I started writing this story, our story, the story of the note that saved my life. And if you're reading this now, I hope you take with you 2 lessons I learned the hard way. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong, even if you can't explain why, and never, ever, underestimate the power of a small act of courage. Like the 5 words my daughter wrote that Saturday morning, words that made all the difference between life and death. Pretend to be sick and leave. Sometimes, to find your true strength, you first need to pretend to have it. And then, one day, you realize you're not pretending anymore. Now, if you liked this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments, what part left you speechless? Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos. I don't post here. I'll be waiting for you.